and you need to tell me, and then you'll tell me that which of these questions you want me to attempt, right? Is this clear? Right, we good on this, students? So let's get started. So first question here says, explain the difference between public goods and private goods. Consider why profit can be made through the supply of one type of good, but not the other. Okay. I think we have done this in the past as well, but let's keep reading. Discuss why merit goods may be underconsumed in a mixed economy. Consider whether maximum prices or education campaigns would be more effective in ensuring that these goods are supplied in appropriate quantities, right? So Aditya, welcome to AS Economics class. So since today is your first lecture, let me quickly walk you through that what we are doing in these classes and what's the format. So we have already covered the syllabus and now we are doing past papers practice, right? So what we do is right now we are focusing on essay questions. So what we do, either you can bring your own questions to the class which you are finding difficult to attempt, or you can or else I will choose some past paper, one of the recent past papers, and then I'll ask you which question you want me to do. So that's one way, right? After doing essay questions, we'll jump to case study questions and then we'll do MCQs and so on, right? So we have just started the class and we're just reading through this May-June 2017 exam. So after reading the questions, I'll take, we'll do kind of voting to see which questions students want me to do. And then I'll get started with that, right? Okay, now this question asks you that why merit goods are underconsumed, and consider whether maximum prices or education campaigns would be more effective in ensuring that these goods are supplied in appropriate quantities. Okay, fair enough. Then next question says, explain the factors that are likely to make the supply of a product relatively price inelastic. So what are the factors that make the product supply inelastic? That's what the question is. Then the B part to the question says, discuss the ways in which businesses might attempt to increase the price elasticity of supply of their products. Assess whether these attempts are likely to be successful, right? So what are some options or strategies that businesses can use to make their product supply more elastic, and whether you think that these attempts will be successful or not, right? Then the last question here says, discuss what is used as money in modern economy. Consider how an increase in the money can cause inflation, right? Okay, then the B part of the question says, discuss the consequences of high inflation. Consider whether internal consequences can even be more serious than the external consequences in an economy that has extensive foreign trade, right? So these are the three questions, students. Now you need to tell me which question you want me to attempt. Yeah, so we can get started with any one and then we can do another one as well, given we go fast. So we can try to do two, but yeah. So which of the three questions do you want me to attempt? Quickly, right? So let's see what are the questions. Question 4, because they're saying question 4. Okay, fair enough. What else? What about other students, right? Is there any other question you want me to attempt, or should we get started with 4? Okay, so Aditya, you are saying 3. Okay, so it's basically 2B. Okay, Abdullah is saying 2B. Okay, this time we have a lot of variety. Okay, now let's do it like this, since because it was the first one to say 4, so we'll do 4. But even if we are not able to do 3 and 2B in this class, don't worry, we'll continue this in the next class, right? So in fact, I can just save this. I'll save this, right? Don't worry, and we'll do this. The remaining questions in the next class. Let's see how many we can get done in today's. Okay, now students, have a look at this. So let's get started with question 4 first. Explain what is used as money in a modern economy, and consider how an increase in money supply can cause inflation. Okay, now think about this. First things first, so you need to define what money is, right? So a very simple definition of money that we discussed in class as well. So money is any commodity that is used to buy, let me adjust my laptop. Money is any commodity that is used to buy goods and services. Or simply speaking, money is a commodity that allows for medium of exchange. Yes or no? Does it make sense or not? Right? So money, sorry about that, just give me a second. So money is any, right? Another idea that's coming to my mind, just give me a second, it will take a few seconds, but this will really make my life easier, right? So I'll type it on the on the sheet, right? So that you can also get to see the definitions and all, right? And then for the diagrams, I'll only use the writing tab. Okay, now mega lecture, and then we go class notes, and then we have AS economics. I'll share all these notes with you. Do let me know if you don't have these notes. Okay, now students, have a look at this. So the question says, let me also take the screenshot of the question so that we have this as right. Okay, now students, can you see my screen? So this is the question, right? So the question says, explain what is used as money in a modern economy and consider whether increase in money supply can cause inflation. Okay, so money is any commodity that is used as, agree with me, right? Okay, now what are the most common forms of money in the modern economy, right? The two, right? So in the modern economy, not just two, there are a couple of different forms of money. I'll explain you all. In the modern economy, currency notes, checks, right? Bank loans, right? Are all classified as money since they allow people to buy desired goods and services. Okay, now students, have a look at this. The idea is, the question says, define what is money, right? Coins and crypto. Okay, now Zuhan, again, think about this. I'm thinking that I've answered this question before as well, but since you asked again, so I'll answer it again in detail, right? So cryptocurrency is an investment tool. It's definitely an investment tool, but would you define that as money? So it's just like asking, like, let me ask you in another way, right? So are you getting me? So it's like saying that your car is money. Technically, it's not money. It's an asset that you can convert into money later on, but it's not money. Are you getting me? So that's the idea. So cryptocurrency, until and unless it has potential of becoming money, right? But when people and businesses start accepting cryptocurrency for the payment, right? So if I'm so cool, if I say, okay, you transfer me cryptocurrency and I'll teach you, which is, I mean, not that surprising given the way cryptocurrency is developing and all that, right? But till then, it won't be defined as money. Are you getting me? But that's definitely a financial instrument, right? Financial instruments or investment instrument, right? Where people save their money and so on, right? Okay, now students, is this getting, are you getting this? So the question said, what is money? So money is any commodity that is used as a medium of exchange. In the modern economy, currency notes, like the coins and notes that we have in our wallets and pockets, checks, right? So writing a check, right? That's also money, because I can pay someone check and they can, just get that check deposited in their bank account and get the cash transferred to the bank, right? So this is how it works. And bank loans. Now, some of you might be confused as to how bank loans, right? Credit cards, exactly. Debit and credit cards. In fact, that's a good idea. We should have that included, right? In the list, right? So bank loans, debit and credit cards are all classified as money since they allow people to buy desired goods and services. Now, one thing that you need to understand, which I might have explained before as well, right? So money has two, right? Two classifications. So one is defined as narrow measure of money, and then it's broad measure of money, right? So think about this. So for the narrow measure of money, it's only the currency notes. Currency notes, debit and credit cards, right? Not in fact credit card, debit card, right? So there would be a narrow measure of money and then a broad measure of money, right? Now, for the narrow measure, we look at what? How much cash you have. This is not working at all, right? I'll forget about it. I'll just write it over there. Okay. So debit and credit card. Okay. So does anyone know what's the difference between debit and credit cards? Right. So think about it. Debit card is only using the money that you have available in your bank account, right? So if I have 50,000 rupees lying in my bank account, I can't use more than 50,000. Obviously, it makes sense, right? So I only have 50,000 rupees available. So either I can withdraw cash from the ATM, or I can go to a shop and, swipe my card and make the payment or whatever, right? But still, I cannot use more than 50,000 rupees because that's the amount available in my bank account. That is debit card. Now, for the credit card is concerned, credit is basically loan. It's kind of a loan facility. Credit always means loan in economics, right? So that is that, let's say if I have a credit card that has a limit. So always credit cards are gauged or, classified in terms of how much limit is available on that card, right? So if you have a limit of 2 lakh rupees or 3 lakh, whatever the amount might be, so you can spend up till 3 lakh rupees, right? From that credit card, right? During a certain time period before you have to pay it back. So this is not your own money. This is not your own money that is lying in the bank account. This is bank's credit facility that bank has extended to you. So you can go on to buying purchase, you can go on to buy things, and all that stuff, but you have to pay it back. And if you delay the payment, then you have to pay interest, just like it happens in any bank loan, right? So if you're making, if your payment is delayed, right, then you have to pay interest on that. Not only the amount that you borrowed, but also some additional payment, which is interest, right? Is this making sense, right? I is classified. Is this clear, Zohan? Classified in 2 categories. Now, students, listen to this very carefully. Narrow supply and broad supply. Now, listen to this carefully. Measure. I'm assuming some of you might be watching this on your phone, so let me increase the font, right? That will, right? So the narrow measure includes bank deposits, debit cards, and currency. Okay. Now, students, think about this. Not bank deposits technically, account for, right? Bank deposits and currency notes. Now, the idea is, students, there is 2 classifications of money supply. One is narrow measure and one is broad measure. And I'll tell you why this distinction is important, right? In the narrow measure of money supply, you include only the bank deposits and the currency notes. Now think about this. What are currency notes? Currency notes are the money that is in circulation, right? Currency notes in fact, to be more precise, let me write this down. Circulation, right? So the money, the cash that's lying in your wallets or in your pockets, right? So if I add up all the cash that's lying in the pockets of Pakistanis, right? So that will give me the currency notes that are in circulation. But then some of this cash might be lying in the banks, right? Some of this cash, right? Let's say I save some money and I put that cash in my bank. So where would that be reflected? So that would be reflected in my bank deposits. So long story short, narrow measure of money supply only includes the currency notes. The currency notes. Are you getting me? Right? Or right? Because it does take account for that, right? So bank deposits and currency notes in circulation. This is making sense, right? So it's only the currency notes. And supply also includes, right, bank loans. Now think about this. And credit cards, because credit cards are also a credit facility. I did tell you, right? Yes or no? Students, are you getting me or not, right? So think about this. And if you're wondering where the checks go, so checks are also part of this, right? So you can only write a check when you have that money available in your bank account. So basically the difference between the two, let me sum it up for you, right? So narrow measure only includes what is your own money that is readily available to spend, right? So narrow measure only includes what is your own money or cash. Simply speaking, it's the cash that's available to be readily spent. Whereas the broad measure not only includes cash, it also includes the loan facilities. Because think about this, at the end of the day, if you want to buy something, I mean, you can either buy it through cash or you can buy it through credit. Are you getting me or not, right? So at the end of the day, if you want to buy something, at least in the modern economy, it's not always the cash that you're paying. Obviously, for small things, you will be paying cash. So if you go to, to buy clothes and you say that, okay, give me this shirt and I'll pay you in 1 month's time or 2 months time. I mean, the shopkeeper most probably will not do that, right? Because it's a very small item to be purchased on credit. But if you go to purchase a house or if you go to purchase a car, then you have leasing facilities, mortgage facilities, and all that, right? So what I'm trying to say here, that narrow measure of money supply only includes the cash that's available to be spent, right? Whereas the broad measure also includes the credit facility. That's why I've written bank loans and credit cards. Students, are you following me or not? Do ask me if there's anything confusing, anything that's not clear, right? So let's sum this up before we move any forward from here, right? So what is money? Money is any commodity, right? It doesn't necessarily need to be cash. Money is any commodity that facilitates the function of medium of exchange. What is medium of exchange? So when you need to buy goods and services, you need to give something in exchange, and that is what money is for, right? Now, in the modern economy, currency notes, right? The cash, basically, right? If this is confusing for you, you can always write this down as cash, right? Checks, right? Bank loans, debit and credit cards are all classified as money since they allow people to buy desired goods and services. Then the money supply is classified in two categories: narrow money supply and broad money supply. Narrow measure includes bank deposits, right? Narrow measure includes bank deposits and currency notes in circulation. Basically, cash. So basically, the narrow measure only includes the cash printed by the central bank. That's either in my pocket, like in our pockets, or it's lying in the bank accounts. That's what the narrow measure is. But we do know that purchasing nowadays doesn't always require cash. You can buy things on credit. So therefore, the broad measure of money supply also includes narrow money supply plus bank loans and credit cards. Is everyone absolutely clear? If there's any confusion, you have to ask me right now, right? So there is basically narrow measure, right? And then you have, I think this will not work today, right? So do you have narrow measure? This will not work, right? But so the way I would want to tell you is that if you want to think about this in the form of a formula, so narrow measure would be only cash in circulation plus cash in the form of deposits, right? And the broad measure would be equals to narrow measure plus bank loans, credit cards, and other bank. Right? Easy. Is this simple? Any confusion so far? Anything that's not clear? Right? We good on this? Okay. I mean, you don't need to write this formula in your exam in a question like this, but in case you have to be more, if you want to be more precise, you may, right? I mean, it will not harm you, but even if you don't write this formula, that's perfectly fine. Okay, can we keep moving, students? Okay, now the second part to the question says, very nice, right? Second part of the question says, consider how increase in money supply can cause inflation. Now we'll talk about both. How increase in narrow measure of money supply will cause inflation, and similarly, how increase in broad measure of money supply will cause inflation. Is it making sense? Right? Okay, now students, let's get started here. So for the, great. Now for the narrow measure, or you can simply write it down, when prints currency notes cash citizens, they have purchasing power increases, and therefore it leads to in Do you agree with me? Right? Now think about this. So just imagine if somehow more cash starts becoming available to you. More cash starts becoming available to you, right? Which means that now I have more cash lying in my pocket, right? Now, what would I do, right? Now, we know that human needs are never satisfied, right? Human needs are never satisfied, right? So what would I want to do with that more cash? I would want to buy more things, more clothes, more food, more, I don't know, things like that, right? So when that happens, people aggregate demand is increasing, right? People will have to more money to buy goods and services, purchasing power increase, causing demand for inflation. Exactly. Now, when that happens, think about this. What will that do? That will cause your aggregate demand to increase. That will cause what? That will cause your aggregate demand to increase, right? Are you getting the channel, right? So more cash is becoming available. With that more cash, I have more purchasing power, right? With that more cash, I have more purchasing power. With more purchasing power, since my demands, there would be so many unsatisfied, demands that I would want to fulfill. So I head towards shop to buy more things, right? Purchasing power is increasing. When that happens, your aggregate demand increases. And what happens due to aggregate demand? That's what we're about to look at. Now, students, think about this. With that happening, let's look at the simple macroeconomic graph to understand what happens when there's higher aggregate demand, right? So the macroeconomic equilibrium graph shows you aggregate demand and aggregate supply, right? So your down sloping is your aggregate demand like this, right? And upward sloping is your aggregate supply like this, right? Easy, right? Okay. Now, where the aggregate demand and aggregate supply, on the y-axis, you have general price level, which is the average prices in the economy. So you can just write the short form, which is GPL, right? So GPL, general price level, is on the y-axis, and you have real GDP on the x-axis. This is always true, right? This graph shows you macroeconomic equilibrium, right? Okay. Now, where the aggregate supply of the economy intersects with its aggregate demand, that would be the macroeconomic equilibrium. Yes or no? Right? Now, when aggregate demand would increase initially, let's say initial equilibrium was at this point where aggregate demand and aggregate supply were equal. So this much was your price level and this much was your GDP, right? And we do know that we denote GDP with Y in economics, right? Now, when your aggregate demand increases because more cash has become available to people and they want to buy more goods and services, right? So your aggregate demand curve would shift to the right like this, right? It will shift outwards to the right from 81 to 82, right? Yes or no? Now, the new equilibrium is at this point, and you can see for yourself that goods and services become on average more expensive. Now, to write this down theoretically, you can also show it through the graph. In fact, if you do remember this graph, it will be helpful to make this graph on the exam for a question like this, but also explaining in words is important. Now, what happened in this case, right? More money supply will increase the investment in the economy, which will create more employment opportunities. So if more people will employ, then purchasing power will increase, causing demand inflation. I mean, in the longer run, yes. In the longer run, Zohan, so to comment on your last comment, right? So you are right about saying this, but that would happen in the longer run, right? Right. So in the first comment you said, right? Another reason that we will increase money supply and the interest rate will fall too. Money supply and concentration due to increase in money supply, people will have more money to buy goods and services, the purchasing power increase, causing demand for inflation. Okay. And the reason could be due to increase in money supply, the interest rate will fall. We are coming to that, causing people to save less as they will get less profit in saving, they'll spend more, they'll call to demand for inflation. The first two are correct. The first two comments are correct. Then the third one, increase in money supply will also cause investment. Okay. So the third one is not correct, John. Like that's correct. But again, I mentioned this, right? So think about this. Will create more employment. Okay, now think about this. Now, this is a very important point that I'm about to tell you, and you have to understand this in detail. Right? Now, students, there is partial equilibrium and then there's general equilibrium in economics. Now, this is what I'm telling you, which you'll learn if you go on to studying economics in your in your undergraduate level, right? So there's partial equilibrium and then there's general equilibrium. Now, the partial equilibrium is just looking at the effect of one variable on another variable, immediate effect, right? So that is a more appropriate word. Immediate effect of one variable on another variable, right? Right. Just Abdullah, I'll answer your question, right? But first, everyone, please pay attention over it. The general equilibrium in economics is basically looking at not only the immediate effect of one variable on another, but it's also looking at the long-term effect. Students, are you getting me? Right? So partial equilibrium, immediate effect of one variable on another variable. I'll give you an example, don't worry, right? If you don't remember the definition, you don't need to, but at least you should understand the example that I'll give you after this. Immediate effect of one variable on another variable, right? Okay, and for the general equilibrium, it's not just the immediate effect, it's also the long-term effect. Also considers the long-term effect of a variable on other variables, right? Okay, now think about this. Now the idea is, if I say that what will money supply, let's take the same example that we're discussing in this question. What effect will money supply have on inflation, right? Students, are you following me? What effect will money supply, increase in money supply have on, sorry, just let me take this up. Okay, what effect increase in money supply will have on inflation? Yes or no? That's what we're looking at, right? Now we do know when money supply increases, what happens? People get more, currency notes in their pocket, and with those more currency notes, they get to, buy more goods and services. So they head out to shops and they start buying more, and that causes inflation. Okay. Now, what Zohan said was that this will happen, but with more cash becoming available, some people might be smart enough to start investing. Okay, fair enough. Now, when they start investing, what will that do? That will mean that it will create more output. With more output, there will be more jobs, and that in turn might cause even more inflation. Is this correct, Zohan? Is that what you said, right? Or I misinterpreted it, right? So, right. So think about this. So initial effect of money supply on inflation would be when I get more cash in my pockets, or anyone else for that matter, we head out to shops, we start buying more. When we start buying more, that will mean not enough stock is available in the shops, but there is more demand. So prices bid up. Simple. That's what inflation is. But a more long-term effect could also be that when more money supply becomes available, people invest. When people invest, that would mean, right, that would mean that more output will be produced in the economy. There will be more output, right? More investment, more output, more employment, and more employment means that, again, more purchasing power, and therefore more spending and more inflation, right? Yes or no? Now, you tell me, students, that which of the two is, Zohan, is this correct? Right? More employment, more purchasing power, and more inflation. Now, you tell me that which of the two is more demand for inflation? Which of the two is immediate effect, and which of the two is a more longer term effect? Forget about whether I've made the correct link between different variables for now or not, but just think about this. Which of the two, just by looking at this analysis that I've done, which of the two do you think, right? Are you getting me? Okay, I get it, Zohan. Yeah, that was also correct, right? So more fall in interest rate could also lead. Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, that's correct. Right? So the first one is more immediate. Students, are you getting me? So the first one is more immediate, right? What will happen immediately? You get more cash, what will it do? right? So if your parents start, so think about like this, right? So today your parents don't think about the entire country, think about yourself. Today your parents say out of nowhere, okay, instead of let's say 5,000 rupees, your pocket money per week, whatever it is, I'll give you 10,000. So your parents have doubled your pocket money. What will you do? Right? So the chances are that you will have so many unmet needs and wants and wishes. So what will you do? The very next day you'll go to a shop, you'll buy something that you haven't purchased so far because you didn't have enough money, right? So this is a very immediate effect that is expected to happen, right? Are you getting me? So the idea is same as what happens in an economy, right? And this is a more longer term. So the first one was partial equilibrium and the second one was general equilibrium. Now, why was this discussion important, right? So this was important that in economics, when we're doing it, right? So most of the times the examiner is expecting this. I repeat myself. Most of the times the examiner, in fact, almost all of the times the examiner is expecting this. If you want to do long-term analysis, then do specify that in long run, another possibility could be this, right? Right. Okay. Now, let me answer your question, Abdullah. Abdullah is saying, listen to this, everyone. Can we say that government can throw national reserve in the market to have stable exchange rate to keep inflation controlled as well? The government. Okay, so now this is not directly related to the question that we're discussing, but I'll answer that, right? Can throw national reserve, right? So foreign currency reserve in the market to have stable exchange rate to keep inflation controlled as well. That's correct. That's correct. Zohan Abdullah. So think about this. So, I mean, if any one of you did not get the question, you don't need to, right? So this is basically not directly related to this question, but let me tell you what he's asking. What Abdullah is saying. So Abdullah is saying that one reason for inflation, like Pakistani students can perhaps relate, that could be due to weaker exchange rate. Right now, oil prices are skyrocketing. I did tell you a couple of times, right? Now, why is that a problem for us? Because we don't have our own oil, right? So we are oil importing country. Oil exporting countries are happy, like and like happy like anything, right? Why? Because they are the ones exporting, they will get more foreign currency reserve and all that, right? So all oil importing countries are in bad position because they have to spend money to buy foreign currency. They have to spend foreign currency to import oil. Now, on top of that, if your exchange rate is also depreciating against dollars, right, which is the currency we use to import oil in, then that makes your life even worse. Now, what Abdullah is saying that by artificially maintaining your exchange rate, right? By artificially maintaining your exchange rate, by making it stronger, the country can make its exchange rate stronger against the currency in which you import the oil, and that would mean that it would cost you less, right? That could be done, Abdullah. That is the possibility. Some countries do that, but the downside of the downside of this strategy is that you are wasting your foreign currency reserve, right? Right? Long chain to prove our point, right? Then we have to state that this will happen. Exactly. That's the point, right? Zuan, correct. Abdullah, did I answer your question? So if you're making a long chain of arguments, right, that this will happen, this will affect this will affect this will affect this, right? So you would know by yourself that this will only happen in the longer run, right? Not immediately, right? So that's what you need to say. Right, that will definitely get you marks. That will definitely get you marks. I'm not saying that you don't have to not. If you remember, even the question that I read and I commented on that. So in that, Zohan, I told you that you need to write long run, differentiate long run, short run, right? Or you can, even if you don't want to write that, at least use the wording immediate effect, long-term effect, right? So that will help, examiner understand what you're trying to say. All right. Okay. Now, going back to the question, students, is everyone clear? So we define what money is. We define what narrow and broad measure of money is. Then we define that how immediately, right, printing of more currency notes, right, will increase the purchasing power, which means people would head out to shops. They will start buying more, and aggregate demand increases. And as through the graph that we just saw, that would result in higher demand pull inflation. Similarly, now this was for the narrow measure. Now thinking about the broad measure. Now broad measure is, we know it's about the bank loans. Now it's about the bank loans. Now students, think about it. when banks are issuing more loans, right, what happens to interest rate? One thing that you need to know, we will discuss more of this. This is more part of our A2 syllabus, that bank loans, let's put it down like this. Interest rates are through and supply of loans, just like any other product, right? So just like the price of any other product. What are interest rates? Nothing but interest rates are cost of borrowing. What is interest? Interest is cost of borrowing. So when do you pay interest? When you borrow money from a bank. Yes or no? Is that correct? Now, how are interest rates determined in the market? Based on supply and demand for loans. Now, there are a couple of people who want to borrow money. So they're demanding loans. Are you getting me? So if I want to buy a car and I don't have enough, if I want to buy a car, and I don't have enough cash lying in my pocket, what will I do? Right? I'll go to bank and try to lease a car. Yes or no? Demand for loans, right? So demand for loans is coming from whom? The borrowers who want to borrow, right? Similarly, if anyone wants to buy a house, doesn't have enough money, will go to a bank and will demand for loans. Easy, makes sense, simple enough, nothing complicated, right? Similarly, who supplies loans? Obviously the banks, right? Who have all the cash, who have all the money deposited there, right? Supply of loans is coming from banks, right? Okay. And you can think of this as banks are lenders. Banks are lenders, they're lending money, right? Okay. Now, where the demand and supply for loans intersect, that will be your interest rate, right? Now, just like any other product, if supply of loans increases, what will happen to interest rate, students? You think about yourself, right? And on the x-axis, you have quantity of loans. So if there's more supply of loans, if banks have started lending more, right? For what reason? Forget about it, right? So what will that do if initially your interest rate was this much, right? If initially your interest rate was, let's say, I1, right? Then with greater supply of loans, right, your interest rates decrease, right? Because more supply is becoming available for the same demand. Now more supply is available for loans, right? And the demand has stayed the same, right? So what will that do? That will mean lower interest rate. Now with lower interest rate, what will people do? Will they be encouraged to borrow more? Right? Now think about this. Previously, I used to borrow for a car, and that used to cost me whatever amount I used to borrow. I had to pay 10% on top of that amount as interest to the bank. Now, if that has come down to 5%, so whatever amount I borrow, I only need to pay 5%, right? So it will be cheaper for me to borrow, and therefore I'll want to borrow more, right? When you borrow more, again, your aggregate demand increases. When you borrow more, again, your aggregate demand increases. When that happens, your aggregate demand curve shifts to the right. With that happening, what will that do? With that happening, right? People spend more, demand for inflation. Okay, students, I'm rejoin the class with the same link. So I'll try to, complete this question. Rejoin with the same link, and then we'll continue from here for next 5-7 minutes, and then stop. Rejoin with the same link.